Today, we're tackling a really tough kind of counterintuitive idea. What if the very things we do to fight poverty are, in some ways, making it harder to solve? It's a huge paradox, so let's jump right in.
So here's the big question, right? For decades, we've thrown literally trillions of dollars and some of the brightest minds at this problem. And yet, poverty is still, well, it's still here. It's incredibly persistent. So what gives? Why isn't it working? That's what we're going to dig into.
Okay, so the main idea we're going to unpack is this concept called failure to maintain poverty. Now I know, that sounds weird, right? Almost backward. But it's actually a perfect way to describe this paradox. How our best efforts, our good intentions to reduce poverty, can sometimes just fizzle out, stall, or in some cases, even make things worse.
All right, so let's start unraveling this thing. We're diving into what's called the poverty paradox. First up, we'll look at the easy answers. The stuff you hear all the time.
So why do these good intentions so often fall flat? Let's start with the most obvious, surface-level problems.
You usually hear two big reasons. First, not enough money. The programs are just underfunded, right? They can't possibly match the scale of the problem. And second, bad execution. You've got poor design, tons of red tape, waste, all this stuff that means the help never actually gets to the people who need it. But, and this is a big but, that's just scratching the surface.
And this right here really shows you the gap. The goal is super simple. Get help to people who need it. But the reality? It's like a tangled ball of yarn. Resources get stuck in bureaucracy, they get lost, and they just don't make it to the end of the line. It's a classic case of good intentions getting totally lost in translation.
But that leads to a much bigger, much more uncomfortable question. What if the problem isn't just about not having enough cash or having too many forms to fill out? What if the system itself, the whole structure, is actually wired in a way that keeps poverty going?
Okay, now we're going to peel back another layer of the onion. Let's look at the deeper, systemic flaws. These are the hidden forces that are really running the show.
You can really boil these deeper problems down to three big barriers. First, you've got unintended consequences, where trying to fix one thing accidentally breaks something else. Second, there's deep economic inequality, which basically rigs the game from the start. And third, you have these ingrained power dynamics that just shut certain groups out. Let's take a closer look at each one.
This quote really nails that first point about unintended consequences. Think about it. A welfare program is supposed to be a safety net, right? But if it's not designed super carefully, you can end up with what's called a poverty trap. Someone might be offered a low-wage job, but if taking it means they lose more in benefits than they gain in salary, well, they're actually punished for working. That's a textbook example of a solution creating a brand new problem.
And that brings us to the second barrier, massive economic inequality. I mean, just look at this chart. The disparity is stark. When you have so much wealth concentrated in the hands of so few, it fundamentally changes the game for everybody else. It's exactly like trying to climb a ladder, but the bottom rungs have been kicked out. It's almost impossible for most people to even get started.
And this isn't just an abstract idea. It has huge real-world effects. We're talking about limited access to the absolute basics you need to build a life, like a good education or decent health care. It means wages stay flat, so even if you're working full-time, you're just treading water, never getting ahead. And the worst part, this stuff gets passed down from parents to children, creating these cycles of poverty that are just incredibly hard to escape.
So that third big systemic flaw is all about power dynamics. And look, this goes beyond just money. This is about systemic barriers, things like discrimination, that are baked into the system and stop entire groups of people from even getting a fair shot. It's not just that the playing field is uneven. It's like some people have to run an obstacle course while others have a clear, paved path to the finish line.
Okay, so that's all the theory. But what does this look like in the real world? Let's check out 3 case studies that show these exact forces at work. This table is a real reality check. Look at the U.S. war on poverty. Its goal was to wipe out poverty, but critics say it ended up creating dependency. That's a perfect example of an unintended consequence, right? Then you've got structural adjustment programs around the world. The goal was to stabilize economies, but what happened? They often led to cuts in social spending, which just made economic inequality worse. And even something that sounds great, like microfinance, giving small loans to the poor, has faced criticism for super high interest rates that can trap people in even more debt. That's a classic case of tricky power dynamics. So you see, in each case, these deep-seated flaws can undermine even the most well-meaning efforts.
Look, I know this can all sound pretty overwhelming, but here's the thing.
You can't fix a problem if you don't understand how deep it goes, and if the problem is a really complex system, well, that just means the solution has to be just as smart and comprehensive.
So what's the answer? What does a system that actually works look like? Let's talk about what a real, comprehensive approach would involve. All right, so here's the blueprint for what works. And listen, it's not one single magic bullet. It's 5 key things that all have to work together. First, you invest in people. That means quality education and healthcare. Second, you have to create real economic opportunities and good jobs. Third, you strengthen the social safety nets to make sure they're not full of holes. Fourth, and this is huge, you have to actively tackle those systemic barriers like discrimination. And finally, number 5, you empower communities themselves. Let them lead. Give them the resources to design their own solutions. It's a whole package deal.
So here's the thing. The blueprint exists. We actually know what we need to do. The roadmap is pretty clear, which leaves us with one last, really big question to think about. If we have the plan, what's actually stopping us from putting it into action?